All right, everybody. Good morning, Joyce. Thanks for the amen to the bracha, and again to Shari and to Stan. Happy birthday, friends! Really beautiful to share today with you. Um, just sharing personally, I have, thank God, been able to teach Torah for a long time and have published commentaries here and there. But today I'm thrilled. I'm really touched that a commentary that I wrote on this week's Parsha, which I'm about to share, was published by my alma mater, the seminary that I went to where I became a rabbi, really the place where I was born. My father, who is a rabbi, um, spoke to me in some ways at his senior sermon at the Jewish Theological Seminary. I was a baby, and I was blessed then to attend JTS myself as an undergrad and for rabbinical school. And so when JTS reached out and asked me to write a commentary for Parshat Korach, I was especially touched. It means a lot that a place where I learned so much asked me to serve as a teacher in this way. So glad to share that delight with you and to share the message that was just published today on JTS's website. So Korach, as we know, was a rebel, and what we also know about him is that he was an effective, charismatic leader. He managed to mobilize people against Moses and Aaron in a very real way, questioning God's appointment of them. The language that he uses is very, very sneaky. Right? He uses the language, as we've spoken about this week already, of equality and equity and everybody's special. What makes the two of you more special? And he attacks Moses and Aaron as if they wanted power. What he's really doing is gaslighting the people, gaslighting Moses and Aaron, because what actually he wants, what Korach wants, is all the power that he accuses Moses and Aaron of having claimed. Now, what I want to look at today is not just the effectiveness of what he does, but his motivations. Because clearly, though he had a position of privilege in the tribe, he was from the tribe of Levi, he's listed in the book of Exodus as being prominent, and all of Levi had special jobs, something was missing in him. Korach wasn't able to feel that he had enough. Now, that doesn't excuse what he did, but it does help us wonder about people who seek power. Remember, Moses doesn't want the power. He tries not to take the job of being the prophet, of going back to Egypt to deliver the people on behalf of God. And Aaron never sought the role. Aaron's only there because Moses said no. So God said, fine, I'm going to send your brother to be your spokesperson. So, what do we know about Korach? Well, we know what the Torah tells us, and then the rabbis begin to imagine. So I want to share a midrash, a comment, a fanciful interpretation of what Korach's questions were. Because if you remember, in the Torah he says, what makes you holy? Why have you raised yourself above the community? What he's really doing is saying, you aren't sent by God. You are not. What he's implicitly saying is, I should be. So deep down, what is his motivation? What's happening inside of him? So this is a legend, a midrash from Bamidbar Rabbah. Listen to the question. I'll explain a little bit of it because the midrash requires some background knowledge. The language is Vayikach Korach. That's from Numbers 16:1. Korach took. And so the midrash is going to explore, what does Korach taking mean? So what was written right before this? Let them place a cord of tchelet, the blue fringe that sometimes you see on people's prayer shawls, on their talesim, their talit. So let them place a cord of tchelet to their tzitzit. Korach jumped on this and said to Moses, is a talit that's made entirely of tchelet, of this mystical blue, is a talit that's made entirely of tchelet exempt from the mitzvah of tzitzit? Meaning, do you have to put another strand of blue if the whole thing is blue? Moses responded, it requires tzitzit. Korach responded, and all tchelet talit is insufficient, but 4 attached threads of blue suffice? He asked a second question. Is a house full of Torah scrolls exempt from the mitzvah of mezuzah? right? If you have a house that is full of Torahs, do you need to put a mezuzah still on the doorway? Moses responded, it requires a mezuzah. Korach said to him, a house that holds all 275 sections of the Torah is insufficient, but one section in the doorway is sufficient, meaning the Torah has these sections stitched together, which makes up the whole Torah. How strange, then, to have all of that in a home and still required on the doorway. The question is an interesting question, actually. And Moses gives an answer, which is it still requires a mezuzah. So Korach said, a house that holds it all, that's insufficient, but you still need a mezuzah? Korach then said to Moses, these matters you were not commanded about them by God. From your own mind you added them. This is why the Torah uses the language, and Korach took. That is always the language of divisions. When people use divisive language, and when what they show you is that they want power, we should understand that they don't see themselves the way leaders should, which is servants. The highest use of power is service, and the most important ethical use of power is to decentralize the self from it. In some theological traditions, I've seen clergy friends say language like, God, use me well, which means ultimately let my actions be for the sake of heaven. What does it mean for us to consider Korach as someone who does not act for the sake of heaven? There are many, many ways to look at what Korach did and to understand more deeply what went wrong. But after all, what is really important is to understand the distinction between Moses and Korach. When Korach and the rabble accuse Moses of claiming power, of usurping power, of taking it, he falls on his face, a dramatic act. And the Midrash even asks then, Moses says, perhaps there is something in this accusation that I have to think about if I am to be worthy of the leader I've always aspired to be, worthy of the power. True leaders are those who see themselves as servants. They don't lead for personal glory, but out of a sense of duty. Those leaders prioritize the needs of community over their own prominence. There's actually a divine quality to this that I wanted to explore just for a moment. So this is how I wrote it in a commentary that I'm glad to be reading out loud for a moment. This is a divine quality the mystics called tzimtzum. The way the mystics of Kabbalah envision God having contracted God's infinite light to create space for the world, a cosmic act of self-limitation. This notion of divine humility is a powerful counter-model to the human tendency toward ego. All too often the case in today's complicated worlds of religion and politics, where individuals conflate their own ambitions with the sacred obligations of powerful positions. Tzimtzum is that decentralization of one's own authority, empowering and encouraging growth for the sake of communal well-being. It is holy to wield power, but only if it is done with holiness, which means not for the sake of self. Alan, it's good to see you too, my friend, as someone who has worked with leaders to help them be their best selves for our communities. The ancient sages of Pirkei Avot said, every dispute that is for the sake of heaven will endure, but a dispute that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. So then they say, well, what's an example? What's an example of an argument for the sake of heaven, meaning one that will endure? Hillel and Shammai, two ancient sages who disagreed vehemently, passionately, but whose students loved each other and knew that they were both fighting for the sake of community. What is a controversy according to the sages that is not for the sake of heaven? The controversy of Korach and all his council. Arguments for the sake of heaven, like those of Hillel and Shammai, they foster understanding. Leaders who see themselves as servants, following the humble model of Moses And the divine example of Tzimtzum creates space where others can thrive and where true communal growth can occur. We are called in countless parts of our world today, religious and political, to understand that the ethical use of power is essential for all of our good, for the sake of community. We shouldn't ourselves try to occupy positions of power so that we can feel better about ourselves. That is not a good reason to be a leader, and it makes decisions very suspect. We have to, friends, find ways of granting space for each other if we are all to succeed. There is so much going on in our world, so much going on in our world, where this lesson from this week's Parsha would make such a good difference. It really would. So what if your house is full of Torah? Have a mezuzah. So what if you're wearing the most beautiful garment? Still put tchelet on it. So what if some of what needs to be is, there are a lot of parts of this world, many places, that need more. And perhaps the way that we can support all of that happening is to do a little tzimtzum ourselves, a little contraction, and see how that works in the world. To choose leaders who model that impulse. Now, I spoke today about a lot of things, but what I didn't talk about was that today is the 271st day since October 7th. Let's make space for that. Let's let some of that in. Let's recognize that the urgency of this moment includes a leadership that prioritizes communal well-being over personal power. That is what will lead to a better tomorrow, to bringing our family home, to helping our family heal. So let's send our hearts east, make space for our family, pray for their well-being, and double down on hope. Kolon balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia on lo avda tikvateinu hatikva bat shnot alpayim liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, friends. Take care.